Jujutsu Kaisen. One of the most popular shonen series in recent history. As of today, it has sold over 100 million copies of the manga, a major ongoing anime adaptation, we're definitely getting season 3, and a huge presence in Annie internet. That term might have just been made up, but don't point at it. Regardless, as popular and beloved as this story was as it was running, the ending...
Michael! Don't leave me here! Michael! Help me!
brought out a lot of emotions from fans, me included. That said, with JJK's story ending 3 months ago...
Would you look at that?
Or rather 6 months ago, and a lot of the discussions and all the big YouTubers have done their reviews, it is time for me, the doctor, to come in and give the right opinion about JJK. Do we even need to talk about the first half of Jujutsu Kaisen? Mitsuda Yuji, our pink-haired lovable protagonist, eats a wrinkly finger belonging to the legendary, malevolent Ryomen Sukuna. And for early on, unknown reasons, instead of instantly dying, he becomes the best of Sukuna, and then saves Fushiguro Megumi, our Aragonist, from dying to a random curse. Gojo, our sensei, comes in and saves Yuji from execution, bringing him to Tokyo Jujutsu High, where he becomes a Jujutsu sorcerer, and vows to eat the rest of the fingers and then die. See? Good goals. Yippee! We later also grab our hot-blooded female third to this lovely trio, Nobara Kugisaki, before one of our first missions. This is our main trio of the series. The dynamics and interactions between these three as they do their work as Jujutsu sorcerers give the story a lot of its life early on. They are often compared to early Naruto and their trio, Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, which is an apt comparison in my opinion, as the general vibe from both main teams are similar, but clearly JJK evolves the dynamic in a positive way. Great fight scenes, good comedic timing, interesting antagonists, each feeling like a fresh take on an existing concept that just works well in the story. Then, with the anime, it takes a great source material and evolves it even further. It's no wonder the series blew up in popularity. But most importantly, it does a great job hyping us up for what's to come further in the story. Not Geto / Naruto Shikamo, Sukuna's plans, Mahito's evolution, Halloween, etc. An amazing start to a series. Now, let's segue over to the next section of the story. Past Season 1 of the anime, Gojo's past arc. This arc gives us more insight into Gojo, a fan favorite of the series. This will be an important detail later, so don't forget this when it comes up a couple arcs from now. Anyway, we learn about young Gojo, his brash, non-caring attitude similar but clearly different from his more caring, involved attitude in the current day. We also meet his best friend, Geto, who looks really familiar to somebody else who's going to be relevant later, who holds a personality similar to future Gojo, but is the strongest alongside him. Enlisted into a mission where they go head-to-head against the sorcerer killer, Toji Fushiguro, as our strongest duo tries to protect Riko Amanai as she's being transferred to the ancient Tengen to be absorbed. Our duo fails to save Riko from her fate, Gojo kills Toji, becomes an honor one, and Geto definitely handles everything very, very well.
じゃあ、非術師を皆殺しにすればいいじゃないですか。
A few moments later.
Isn't she? Filthy monkey who can't even use jujutsu.
Proceeding on, the end of all this brings us back to present day with Shibuya. Shibuya. Which has been covered in Season 2, is a combination of all the plot hooks / plot points set up through the first season and the past arcs / in preparation right before Shibuya. The danger of Sukuna, the cursed plan to defeat / seal Gojo, Choso's revenge for his fallen death-painting brothers, the reveal of the one controlling Geto's corpse, and so much more. It's also where the stakes felt the highest and the lack of invincibility that our main cast is under in this cursed world was the realest. This arc needs no explanation because the anime does a great job at it. Just watch the anime. Now, let's move forward. So, how was the story after the end of Shibuya?
Michael, don't leave me here! Michael!
It was alright. I don't think the series was absolutely god-awful after Shibuya, as there are still many enjoyable arcs, fights, and character moments throughout. But, the essence of the issue is, we were shown an ever-expanding, gritty world with cool fight scenes that had depth just as deep as the world building surrounding it. Then, as we got closer to the ending, the high heights we knew the story could reach were simply never reached again, despite having all the capabilities to be there. Even when we saw the dregs of the perfect shonen we were promised under all the failures surrounding those moments. But I digress. That may have sounded confusing. But to draw my conclusion more clearly, we will be covering everything, every arc, and pretty much everything that happens post Shibuya to show the quality of what is there and how it failed to rise to the heights in the first half of the manga, or specifically the potential that was showed in the first half. Now that we're past the clear sunny skies of those first half of arcs, let's get into where opinions get cloudy. These first two arcs aren't even seen too poorly, Itadori's extermination and perfect preparation. These two arcs cover right after the disaster in Shibuya and prepares us for the next overarching section. Yuji and his newfound brother, Choso, are hunting curses in the wastes of Japan as it has been overrun with curses. They eventually get jumped by Yuta and Naoya. Yuta looking to kill Yuji, and Naoya looking to kill Megumi for being the new clan head instead of him, and trying to get him through Yuji. Yuji gets killed, quote unquote, and Naoya goes home. We find out that Yuta was faking the whole executioner thing and plans to work with the students to save Gojo. It's after this we meet our new main cast and get an idea of what we'll be dealing with in the next half of the story. Yuki, a mysterious special grade who wants to save the world from the issues with curses in the first place. Megumi, Crispy Maki, Post Burning, Yuji, Choso, Panda, Yuta, and most interestingly, Tengen, the mortal who maintains the foundations of Jujutsu society. We learn a bit about Kenjaku's plan to run this thing called the Culling Games, and most likely capture Tengen as part of his end goal. Yuki and Choso stayed with Tengen to defend it while the rest of the gang goes to stop Kenjaku, save Gojo, and save Megumi's sister, who is forced to participate in these games. But before we get to the actual games, we have to have some.
I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
First, Maki has to gather some resources from the Zenin clan, and Megumi, Yuji, and Panda have to recruit the powerful expelled student Hikari Kenji to their side. Maki gets to the Zenin clan, and almost gets killed by her dad, but her sister, Mai, sacrifices her life to give Maki a really cool soul-cutting sword, and, by proxy, buff her heavenly restriction to levels on par with Toji. Maki then takes this buff and kills everyone in the Zenin clan, and she's just objectively the coolest now. Simultaneously, our second group, Yuji, Megumi, and Panda, break into Hikari's fighting ring to convince Hikari and Kirara to join them. There's some hijinks that even get to see Hikari, but Yuji and Megumi are eventually able to convince both of them to come help in unsealing Gojo. From here, everyone is given a task of getting points to add rules to the Culling Games to help free Megami's sister, and get in contact with a certain player named Angel so they can free Gojo from the prison realm. Now the first half of the Culling Games. For me, this is where the story probably takes a decline. The fights are pretty good, and I also understand the concept going into this section. Each sorcerer must run a gauntlet of fights in their colony to gain the necessary points one way or another to add the rules they need to save Tsumiki, Megami's sister. Then along the way, coincidentally acquire new allies or gain new strengths that will be helpful in facing Kenjaku when the time comes later. The problem that plagues this part of the Culling Games arc is pacing. All the sections, or the colonies, happen more or less at the same time in universe. So out of universe, as a reader, we see one absolute peak colony, one peak, two really good colonies, and two methods.
Stinky.
But the entire time, the plot is not actually progressing until the end of each one. This means that if you are not enjoying any given colony, you're stuck reading something unentertaining that kind of is pointless until every colony is finished. Or in other words, this whole first half of Culling Games is over. This would be fine if these colonies/sections weren't long and ran one after another, but alas, they do. As someone who has a bit of a reptile brain and sees good fights in hype, and then regardless of context, even I couldn't deny how much of a slog Maki and Noritoshi versus Naoya is, how pointless and boring Hikari's colony feels until we get to Kashimo. Now, these are relatively small issues, to be fair, in the overall story, and at the absolute worst, this section of the Culling Games arc isn't even looked at that badly, at most getting mixed emotions. Then, by comparison, the parts that are liked in this section are absolutely adored. Yuta, Sendai. But, of course, all will be paid off with time. Let gay up. This is a really good fight. Choso versus Kenjaku, then Yuki and Choso versus Kenjaku. And also a little assistance from Tengen, but yeah, anyway. Really cool, hype, and dynamic. Gives some really good characterization to Choso, and gives us more insight on the ideals and plans of Kenjaku. Revealing he's not planning on world domination or destruction, but rather is a guy bored with the current state of things and wanting to shake the game up, so to speak, and do this merger in hopes of something interesting coming out on the other end. Yuki finally gets to show off her skills, and we get to see the value of Todo's teacher and the mysterious 4th special grade. We even find out some stuff about Tengen. Seems like an overall good section. What could possibly... Oh, the ending. Personally, I think the ending in and of itself is fine. It's not the tightest fight in the series. A couple of things happen at the end that you have to kind of glaze over and not think about too hard for it all to make sense. For example, Mini Uzumaki surviving the black hole using gravity technique that we don't know why you can reuse, surviving a point blank piercing blood with no damage, etc. But these, in my opinion, are minor issues compared to the glaring why the flying fuck did you kill Yuki Sukuna in this fight. Yuki was pretty mysterious and seemed very significant up to this point. Argued philosophy with Kenjaku, researching the soul, one of the very few special grades, seemed like she would be getting used more in the story. Yet she dies in her first real appearance and only fight in the series. She looked good in the fight, just seems like she's gone way too soon. But hey, there's so much more left in the story. Maybe she'll leave something behind and Gege will make her presence felt in another impactful way. Right? So it's post Yuki and Choso versus Kenny. We return to soldiers dropping into the Culling Games as Kenjaku has invited other countries to send forces to attempt to capture sorcerers for their personal gain. I wonder how this will play. Not relevant in the slightest. Not important. Don't get hung up on this. Yeah, just this unironically never comes up again in the story, and despite having a lot of interesting implications, particularly in respect to the fact that a whole world knows about jujutsu now, but nothing. Anyway, proceeding to relevant stuff, we return to our gang finding out about Kenny's win against Yuki and Choso, and theorizing about what this means for them. Regardless, Megumi prepares to get Tsumiki out of the Culling Games now that all the rules are in place that are needed to do so. But nope. That wasn't his sister. Not anymore, at least. Big reveal, and I loved it. Now, some feel that Megumi should have known or checked that his sister was still his sister. But I think it's very reasonable to say that Megumi cherishes his sister in a way and relies on her as a permanently positive anchor in his life that makes him optimistic about her in a way where he's willing to believe in them despite what logic might say. Yuji is also someone who I feel also falls into this category for Megumi. He just trusts Yuji to just come through, even if the logic would say that he really shouldn't be trusting Yuji as much to handle a situation come through with a positive outcome. But forget all this, honestly. After all, we have an even bigger twist in the exact same chapter. Right after this insane reveal, we get a long-awaited end chain. And Sukuna takes over Yuji's body with the binding vow at long last. Meguna is such an amazing twist for the story and recontextualized the scenes between Sukuna and Megumi in a really foreboding way. We really couldn't have seen coming, but makes sense in the story. The subsequent power flex Sukuna does in Megumi's body, followed by Yuji's range, and Sukuna's utter indifference towards it, followed by Maki's popping in for an impromptu fade. Truly a writer's kiss on this one. The final chapters of Culling Games were great, Sukuna fully taking over Megumi's body it seems, Sukuna showing off how devastating he could be with the 10 Shadows, Kenny's plan coming together, and of course the long-awaited Gojo return. Going into the final arc, while there are issues leading up to it, pacing, plot issues, desire for more elaboration on certain characters, I think overall the rest of the story looks like it'll be exciting and resolve any lingering issues someone may have been concerned about leaving the Culling Games. How wrong they'll be. Not having downtime before the Gojo vs Sukuna fight was a strange decision in my opinion. I think having Gojo interact with his students, playing with them, catch up with them after being gone for so long would have been a great change of pace from the constant action. I don't completely hate this choice to more or less hop right into a long-awaited fight between these two, as I see the logic of wanting to flash back to relevant discussions that happen between everyone in the time skip when it's relevant rather than sit through build-up and slice of life chapters before a very anticipated fight. But problem with Gege's plan is that for it to be considered done well, he'd have to make these flashbacks make perfect sense, fit the pacing of the fight wherever they're at it, and then be perfectly placed so that then it doesn't break the action, seeing as in universe of JJK, we're just continuing to see action, not get a flashback, if you get what I mean. Gojo versus Sukuna. This section is truly a work of pure art. From top to bottom, the fight is hype. Everything that happens makes sense, in my opinion. It is action-packed. The domain section in the beginning can be slow considering how many chapters of back and forth it is, but in universe, it's a necessary section as it's the strongest card either of them can play. Getting it out of the way and attempting to get the easy win right off the bat is just logical for both of them, as well as good so we can get into the hands section in the second half. I think there are a few scenes you may genuinely get confused by, but it's never really anything so jarring you can't just keep reading past and still enjoy. That is until the ending. I am not a Sukuna sucker or Gojo glazer. It was perfectly fine. It makes sense for Sukuna to kill Gojo in this fight. Narratively, it makes sense. Gojo is constantly playing catch up with Sukuna in this fight. Not only that, but it has been alluded to on multiple occasions in the fight that Sukuna isn't playing all his cards and is likely plotting something. All makes sense. But lack of a hint to Gojo's demise in the chapter before his death was the dumbest thing Gege could have done to a fan favorite like Gojo. I don't think the criticism that his death makes no sense is fair for a number of reasons. I can explain in the comments if needed. But this garnered so much bad will unnecessarily, it cost him a lot of grace/free passes after that point. This is then amplified by Gojo's post-death chat. Rereading it, it's insane how much Gojo doesn't talk about his students, the people he left behind, etc., and instead glazes Sukuna and laments not satisfying him.
Pause!
I don't think the discussion and the thoughts he had about Sukuna, or the fight, or what is actually like being him, the strongest, was bad, but considering the exact point in time that this was done, it just feels like a spit in the face of anyone who enjoys Gojo and by proxy of the character Gojo. Just like the team after Gojo's death, we move on and swing fast. Kenny versus Takuba. This fight feels like it drags, but it's very likely it's because the jokes and style of humor isn't made for older people, and particularly people not raised with Japanese style of humor. I think the concept of Kenny finding surprising entertainment in Takuba and that captivating him in a way that he was kind of looking for is a great concept, even if the execution feels meh. Yuta coming in and assassinate Kenny during his sense of bliss works, but what happens to his plan? Well, surely it'll be elaborated on since we are left with a cliffhanger. Right. Sukuna Cycle. First section. Honestly feels pretty good to read. The choice to have Higuruma's death sentence confiscate Sukuna's cursed tool instead of his technique is a bit of an ass-pull, even if the existence of an explanation does give it some logic. But outside of that, each fight makes sense and Sukuna truly feels like a raid boss he's supposed to be. ENFZ is clearly progressively worn down. No one who faces him is any more safe than the last person in line. When we move into Ghetto's old teammates popping in, it's a bit stupid feeling since they literally come out of nowhere, but with the use of the flashback and students having context of wanting backup plans for what is literally the biggest battle in modern history, it's really not that bad, though it does feel a little bit cheap. Second section. Starts off really good. Yuji is now the focus of the assault, and while at first he and the others look endangered, Yuji begins to hit black flashes as well as awakens the shrine technique from Sukuna and steals away the lead he was gaining from his own black flashes, putting the win back into sight. Riveting situation. Great build-up, feels great. Then Sukuna's domain is back. Okay, not bad, but how'd he get to use it with missing arms and no RCT?
Sukuna used an assortment of impromptu binding vows, and a different part of his brain unaffected by infinite void. He regained Malevolent Shrine, with no loss in output or range.
Okay, Okay. It's fine. We can move on. Choso sacrifices himself to save Yuji from Sukuna's domain in subsequent era, leaving Yuji feeling helpless with no one left besides Todo, who got a new arm. Todo and Yuji versus Sukuna thus begins and is really cool and pretty hype, but it does feel a little undercut by the fact that if Todo was available to participate, shouldn't we have come in earlier? While it's explained that some of their plans were kept from Yuji in case he was accidentally leaking them, I think this plot point would feel important if Sukuna had alluded to or shown that he knew what they were planning in advance, but regardless, we once again move on. Third section. Yuta takes over Gojo's body to fight Sukuna. Some people feel like this is messed up, but I think Gege really shows his skill as a writer by showing Yuta feels a strong sense of responsibility to Gojo, and has wanted to and continues to want to not let him feel lonely. Yuta being one of the few people who understands what it's like to be close to the strongest, but not so far he lacks the humanity that allows him to relate to others. Because of this, he sees everyone else being concerned about preserving their humanity as ridiculous, since Gojo is in turn expected to keep being the inhumane on his own in their stead. This is where the idea of using his body comes about, and I really like it. I think the execution of Yuta as Gojo is also good, implying that Yuta's subpar performance as Gojo then says that Gojo was the strongest because he trained to be that way beyond his natural gifts. Gojo slash Yuta has a short stint in the story as he can't maintain himself after using his domain to counter Sukuna's. This leaves Yuji and Todo to face Sukuna alone once more. Some more very cool looking fighting happens before all the assistants are taken out of play, finally and officially leaving only Yuji to fight, finally returning to full capabilities and at full strength. Sukuna. Final section. Yuji uses his domain to capture Sukuna and allow Yuji to use his special Soul Dismantle as a guaranteed hit effect on Sukuna, which would be lethal for Sukuna when it hits. But weird parts of this is the lack of name to the domain. It's obvious the domain is supposed to be more or less Malevolent Shrine, but it seems like another thing that is an unnecessary detail to skip that when included ties things together very nicely, but when not included just leaves things weirdly ambiguous. Seems to be a more common issue as we near the end, huh? Proceeding. While the Spirit Realm chapter has no prior context in the slightest, the attempt to talk no jutsu Sukuna, and Sukuna basically saying that trying to convince him to care about people is bitch activity, is hilarious and good characterization for Yuji and Sukuna in my opinion. I think the subsequent moment where Gege touches on Megumi basically losing all purpose and losing a reason to slow Sukuna, since Sukuna sufficiently steeped him in darkness, and Yuji having to accept that is good. But the acceptance being turned on its head with Megumi changing his mind on giving up, knowing he's hurting someone he cares about, who's alive, giving him new life, is great. This gives Yuji the upper hand until Sukuna threatens to use his domain again. Because Sukuna shouldn't have any access to his domain at this point. But it's okay. Because Nobara is alive and can use her residence on Sukuna and stopping him. Also, Nobara is back and with an eye patch. The twist about Yuji's fingers and the gauntlet is good. Nobara being back at the end of the story, not even having been secretly training, but having literally just woken up is utter horseshit, as it turns her into an almost literal Deus Ex Machina woman, as she guarantees Yuji's win out of no fucking where. I digress. This stops Sukuna enough for Yuji to gain the final upper hand and hit Sukuna with a black flash, finally defeating him. This is then combined with Megumi regaining his will and resisting Sukuna, getting his body back. In the end, Sukuna chooses to die as a curse and rejects everyone. Nice touch. Also, fuck Hokari versus Arame. Am I right, boys? No point in covering the ending chapters specifically. This is because it's mostly nonsense in my opinion. Besides some of the character interactions, and the Sukuna section showing he accepted his loss and intends to be a different person if reincarnated in the last chapter. Now, the single epilogue chapter that released after the end of the manga though, is pretty decent in my opinion. It lets us check in on a couple of characters at various points in time after the final showdown, and so feels a bit better just because it's so far removed in a sense from the main ending. And so when it elaborates on characters' lives in the future, it feels more complete and enjoyable and relevant, despite in a sense being irrelevant to a lot of questions that plague the main ending. So, why do people dislike the ending? The Sukuna Cycle, and generally find so many issues to be dampening their enjoyment of JJK toward the end. While getting into specific things in the story I found bad or annoying, Gege wrote a story that had so much potential to expand in so many ways. By showing in the first half, in many different sections past Shibuya, that he has the capabilities to write perfection, or at least something that feels super close to perfect shonen. Rich world building, with realistic characters that act and react realistically, good tension, amazing execution on setups, etc. It had it all. As we get closer and closer to the ending, the issue that held back JJK the most was wrapping things up neatly. Gege seemed to have so many ideas, many of them great ideas in concept, and a lot of directions for the world of JJK, but no idea how to effectively and satisfyingly wrap up a lot of these ideas. Wasted or misused characters, pacing issues, not filling out details so the story could be 100% clear on what it wants you to understand, and then never elaborating on details that would be important or meaningful to the readers, but then explaining other details in lieu of those as if the things actually explained matter to us, the reader. Example, the time spent during the final chapters explaining how simple domains work and the whole detail about the person taking advantage of people using simple domains and some such. JJK's ending feels bad because the story easily had many great plot points, concepts, and time periods that would have been very interesting and were directly teased to us. That potential for an even better story completely left behind as the story barreled toward the finish the closer we got to the final chapters, leaving unanswered questions and unsatisfying plot points that we as fans just have to sit with, at least for now. If we had 50 chapters to elaborate on many things that were left on the cutting room floor, things that weren't set up properly despite having all the relevance and potential to be great moments, I'm sure that series would be remembered 10 times more fondly. To put it as an analogy that I heard in a video about the ending, we are Ryu Ishigori. We have enjoyed a satisfying story where for the most part we got everything we wanted. But after a delicious and full story, we need dessert. Something to tie everything together to satisfy us completely on a well-published story. But Gege never gives us that dessert, instead showing us the recipe for a dessert we wanted, but one he'll never write. So unlike Ryu, we are left unsatisfied, dreaming of the story we could have had, and sad that the manga we do isn't that. In the end, I personally give this story a 7 out of 10. Great story, just not the greatest like it could have been. Well, that's that. Thanks for watching. Catch y'all in the next one. Peace. Also, one last little thing, if you're still here, love you man or girl, whatever. Anyway, thanks for coming. Thanks for watching the video all the way to the end. My channel, on for a long while. I am returning. I actually have a second video project in mind that I'm going to start, not as soon as this video goes up, but maybe a little bit after. I'll probably make a separate video to discuss the topic and / introduce what direction the channel is going into, but just keep an eye out, subscribe, put the notification bell on, all the works. I shall be back, and not in 3 to 6 months. Alright, catch y'all.